Am I audible to all of you? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. This is GKL. Okay. So now I'm going to start the other half of the inorganic section. Okay. So organic section is completed. Inorganic section, as you know that Professor Murugabal has started. He had taken few classes. And now I am planning to start my section, which is I guess that if it is correct, your last date is of class is lecture is 19th, right? Or something like that. So most likely I would be getting 8 days. So 8 days into 1.5 hour per day. Uh, so this is a very difficult time for everybody, and you people still can manage something, but for me it's not so easy to manage, but I'm trying. If there are any issues in between, please unmute yourself and convey to me, and you try to sort it out. Okay, and otherwise let it go on like this. And you know that our classes Monday and Thursday, the timing is not a very comfortable situation. 2 o'clock post lunch or immediate lunch may not be very convenient to many of, I should say, we, including myself. But it's okay. We have to manage it. Now we will discuss the issue of exam pattern a bit later on. Now, if I understand correctly, that out of 50% of inorganic section, so 25 plus 25. So Murugabal would take roughly 25 marks exam as he decides to move on, and I shall be taking 25. Now these 25, there are variety of options we discuss first, and one of the options could be 3 quizzes, 10 plus 10 plus 5, or 2 quizzes, or one in the form of quiz, whatever it is. But online exam is not a very straightforward game. We'll see how best we can do it based on our honesty, and I hope all of you are equally honest to deal with the exam. Okay. Next point is that this is a little bit different kind of course. I'm saying a bit of different kinds, as you have already experienced in organic and in fractional inorganic part. So we would essentially talk about the certain spectroscopic techniques, and then to see how to utilize this spectroscopic technique for molecular level understanding. That is the basic goal of this particular course, and it's a bit advanced level course, but uh, we can think about this particular section in two ways. One, to develop the basic features. What is the meaning of this spectroscopic technique? How it should be understood well, and then how to make the application of this technique for molecular characterizations or certain understandings. Now you know that each spectroscopic technique has its own strength and parallel limitations. So we need to understand both the things together. And also remember that this one particular spectroscopic technique cannot solve all the problems around the molecule. It's a very selective. That one technique could be utilized to understand certain features of the molecules, which cannot be understood by using the other spectroscopic technique. Or sometimes it happens that to understand the molecular features as a whole, you need to take the help of multiple spectroscopic technique. Now again, it depends on what kind of molecules you are dealing with. If you deal with organic molecules, we are essentially two types of molecules, right? Please don't unmute it, we mute it, okay? So essentially, we are using two kinds of molecules. One is organic molecule, other is the inorganic based molecule. Now, spectroscopic understanding of organic molecules, in my opinion, is rather relatively simpler. I'm not saying simple, but relatively simpler compared to your metal complexes or metal-based systems, because metal-based presence of metal creates a lot of perturbations in the system, and it makes the system much more complicated. Now, among all the techniques available, I'll talk about it a little bit later on. But for this particular course, I thought to give an exposure of EPR spectroscopy. Now, EPR is not a very general spectroscopic, item. It's rather very specialized item. Now, this specialized item, it needs specialized approaches. And its also, its application is also rather specialized, but is very important technique. Now, you remember that any spectroscopic technique, it involves a lot of physics and mathematics. With the chemists are generally a bit cleverer, I should say that way, because they discovered the things and we use the things. Or in a vice versa situations, physicists or physical chemists, I should put it this way, they can develop a lot of mathematical approaches, spectroscopic, discoveries, etc. But they don't have the necessary molecules to utilize this technique to understand their strength or weakness. But it is the organic or inorganic chemist, they do have the molecules in hand. They can make the new molecules, and those new molecules could also be tested by using different spectroscopic techniques. Now, let's move to the next slide. For EPR technique, you will see there are many books are available in our library. Of course, you are not in a position to visit your library right now. But what you can do, that in internet, that is our best friend in today's context, you will get huge materials on EPR. So that's not a difficult thing. Variety of materials are there, but mostly things are similar type, and you can go through. But for our general understanding, the two books normally students could follow. You are aware of both the books. One is the Drago book, and if you see the Drago book, there are two chapters are there. I've forgotten. One is 300 starting page, one is 500. Of course, it depends on the edition. And one chapter it deals with a lot of Hamiltonians from the physics perspective, which I don't ask you to try to understand. A lot of physics are involved. But the other chapters, the later part, it deals with the real molecules. Okay, and that you can understand in a better way. On the other hand, you can also use this Hui book, a very standard inorganic chemistry book, which deals with certain aspects of the spectroscopic things, etc., etc. Not to a large extent, but to a certain extent. Why I referred this Hui book? The reason is that if you see the ESR or EPR techniques, essentially or eventually you would understand after a few of my lectures that this technique actually helps us to understand the electronic structural aspects of the molecule. Now, when we talk about a molecule, either organic or inorganic, there are two types of structural aspects. One called molecular structure, where you would be getting metric parameters. Metric parameters mean bond distances, bond angles, planarity, non-planarity, all sort of things through X-ray crystallography. If you have a good single crystal, and if you get the structure of the molecule, then you will get all the necessary information about the molecular structure, which tells you how the molecule would look like, what about the metric parameters, distances, angles, planarity, deviation, molecular distortion, etc., etc. But it won't tell you the electronic structural effect. Electronic structural aspects means how the electron distributions are within a particular molecule at the valence shell. And if it is a metal complex, then the valence distribution at the metal ligand interface, and that tells you in a broader sense that electronic structural aspects, and that is sometimes very complicated. I will give certain examples, you will see it in due course, that apparently electronic structure one could think about in a very simplified fashion for most of the molecules, but not for all molecules. Particularly in our biological systems, you must have heard the name of galactose oxidase. Okay, just one example I am talking about. There are many such examples where the immediate question comes up: what is the metal oxidation state in galactose oxidation oxidase? Say copper. The copper 1, copper 2, and the organic fragments around the molecule where there is any radical, and how the metal and ligand radicals are interacting, what sort of modes, etc., etc., etc. So similarly, in variety of other metalloproteins, that question comes up: the electronic distribution at the metal ligand interface. And there the EPR comes in a very, very big way to sort out the problems from the very fundamental level. And once you understand that problem, then you can extend that aspects for molecular recognition, for catalysis. And in today's context, you will see mostly metal ligand cooperativity in catalysis, which has become very popular and very important. And there the electronic structure comes into comes into the system to play a big role. Okay, so keeping all these things in mind, we will start thinking and understanding how it goes on. Now, you have already gone through, I guess, the NMR spectroscopic aspects in organic division, as well as I think Professor Murugavel also touched upon some NMR. And there you will see NMR is a very unique technique, both from metal complexes and from organic perspective. Why? It tells you about the structures of the molecule, the spectroscopic feature which corroborate the structure thing. Though NMR cannot help you to see the structure, unlike your crystallography, where you could see the molecular structure on the screen. But NMR won't tell you. But NMR would tell you, looking at the spectral feature, and by analyzing the spectral aspect, you could corroborate the structures what you have got through the crystallography. Or sometimes particularly for organic molecules, if the molecule is not too big, NMR would tell you that what kind of molecule it is, what kind of conformation, etc., etc., all sort of information. But EPR will give you about that molecular aspect in that sense. It will only talk about the electronic aspect. Please try to understand the molecular aspect and electronic aspect. These two are different issues. Of course, eventually they are related to each other in a certain way, but they are not directly representing the same issue that I'm trying to address through this talk. Now, one important thing, I have already said the same, that one spectroscopic technique is not enough to understand the molecular feature. So you have to bring a lot of things together, and then you can apply one spectroscopic technique to extract certain information under the banner of that spectroscopic technique. And then you can move into the other spectroscopic technique to extract some other features. And then at the end of the day, you can collate all the data together, and that would give you, much better understanding of that molecule, whatever molecule it might be. So EPR, in that sense, or for any other spectroscopic technique, first you have to get the structural information, how that molecule would look like. But in that context, your X-ray crystallography is very important, because which will tell you that this is the molecule. And then you apply different spectroscopic techniques, etc., to go in deep insight into the problems. But initially, you need to know the structure, how the structure look like, right? So crystallography would help you to understand that thing, and then you apply all the things one by one and to see how it goes on. Now, this is how I thought to, segment the whole, uh, lecture. So I would address, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 points. The first, it will be general aspect, which I will start today. And then we would go into, hyperfine and super hyperfine coupling issues. Then we will move into the examples of organic radicals. And then the fourth one will move into the metal complexes. Then one of the important issues in EPR, that is called the G parameters and G anisotropy, etc. I'll talk about. Followed by, I would go into zero field splitting, Cramer's degeneracy, non-Cramer's system, etc. And then we would move into the application part. So two aspects I would be considering as a part of application. One is the electronic structural aspect, as I said, spin configuration, and then how EPR would be, applicable in understanding the mixed valence feature. So this is how I would like to design the course. But if you have any suggestions, we can move on accordingly. Okay. Well, let's move into the first part. That is your general aspects. Now, as I said, that there are different kind of spectroscopic techniques, right? And which depends on what source of electromagnetic radiation you are using for the source material. For example, if we move from very high energy source to the low energy source, if we use the gamma ray, okay, as a source material, then we would be essentially dealing with the Mossberg spectroscopy. So you may be aware of it or you may not. We'll see whether we can cover it a little bit at the later part. And you see that wavelength range over here. Then you can use the lower energy containing radiation, and then that is X-ray spectroscopy. Okay, that will give you different kind of information. Gamma would mostly give you the nuclear level understanding. X-ray would be slightly different. Then we could move into our electronic spectroscopy, which covers visible to ultraviolet, this region. And in addition to that, it can also cover in between one region, which is called near infrared region, which is very important, near infrared region, to understand certain things. Okay, so that means we have Mossberg spectroscopy, we have X-ray spectroscopy, we have electronic spectroscopy, including near infrared spectroscopy. Also, we have infrared zone. That would give you the vibrational level spectroscopic aspects, which is a completely different spectroscopic technique. Then we will have the microwave region spectroscopic technique, which is your EPR. EPR is essentially the low energy spectroscopy, where the microwave frequency is used to promote the electrons from the ground level to the excited state level. Okay, and then the further lower energy limit, we call it radio frequency which is the NMR region, as you know. So any spectroscopic technique, eventual item is same. That is, you have to have the electronic or nuclear level energy gap. That gap should be ground to first excited state or subsequent excited state, which you would not consider right now. Ground to first excited state. And what is the energy difference? That we call delta E. So that amount of energy, if we pump into the system, and then it will move from ground to that level. Okay. And then the amount of energy would be absorbed that could be recorded properly, and based on that we have the absorption spectroscopic technique like EPR, like NMR, like UV visible. These are all absorption spectroscopic technique. We can also have the emission spectroscopic technique, the opposite one. After excitation, how the energy is being emitted, that could also be recorded. So what I'm trying to mean, I try to mean that just based on the energy content or the frequency of the incident light, we can have so many spectroscopic techniques, and you will see later on that each technique has its own advantages, disadvantages, and each technique would provide you one particular aspect. You cannot expect that this NMR would give you all the information what you could otherwise get through the other spectroscopic. You know, there is no way to do so. So you have to use so many spectroscopic techniques depending on the nature of your molecule and also what you would like to understand. That is very important. If you would like to understand a small amount of certain things, then you go for that only. But if you want to have the very holistic picture of the molecule, then you need to look into all the aspects together. Okay, one simple example about the spectroscopic technique I'm telling you, you must understand this thing, that when you get the electronic spectroscopic technique, you will have, say, E1, E2, okay, and that is your visible to UV range. But that means that infrared level, which are essentially between the two E level, two electronic levels. So when you allow this much of energy, that means UV or visible region, it would cover both the vibrational levels and the electronic level, because vibrational levels are much smaller compared to electronic, and which are buried inside the electronic level. And that is why always you will get electronic spectrum little bit broader rather than the one line spectrum. Yeah, because it contains the vibrational component. But on the other hand, if you go for infrared spectrum, you'll always see sharp peak, because you are now dealing with the smaller energy gap. In between, you have the rotational level of energy bands. So you have to understand all these things together. But in a microwave region, this is a safe region in the sense where you do not have any interference from the electronic level. You have only the item you need to consider only the spin setup. Okay, we'll discuss all these things later on. Now, this is a very broader picture as far as the ESR is concerned. Now, you know that EPR, it has two different terms. You can use whatever you want. It varies from book to book, from person to person. Electron paramagnetic resonance or electron spin resonance. So one can, both are same. The spin gives you paramagnetism, and paramagnetism originates to the unpaired spin. So both are the same thing, but terminology wise they are different. Okay, so it's your choice. Now this EPR or ESR, it tells us that to have the active situation as far as the EPR is concerned, you need to have at least one unpaired electron. Unlike NMR essentially deals with the diamagnetic molecules. That means all the electrons are paired up. Okay, but that does not necessarily mean that for paramagnetic molecule NMR won't be effective. Yes, NMR would be effective, but that's much complex situation, okay, which gives us the contact shift effect, paramagnetic contact shift effect, and which makes the NMR much more complicated than the usual way we look at NMR, okay. And that contact shift, that impact, which could be understandable, but it required the special expertise, okay. Otherwise you can, for example, those who are dealing with the metal complexes, quite often we come across this contact shift effect because many metal complexes are paramagnetic, but for their these paramagnetic molecules you can also record NMR, and there we need to deal with the factors called contact shift effect, and that can be understandable. Organic molecule also. Organic molecules, you have the radicals, and radicals could be monoradicals, could be biradical, etc., etc., and that could be studied by EPR, and parallelly you can study by NMR also. But those NMR would be much more complex in nature compared to the normal NMR, which deals with the diamagnetic feature of the molecule. Okay. Now you need to have one unpaired electron either at the organic sector, which we call free radicals, or you can have a metal complex where your unpaired electron would be on the metal side. Okay, could be one, could be more. We'll talk about that in due course. So essentially what we are talking about, you will have a non-closed system. That means open cell system. So open cell system means S not equal to 0. So you have to use S not equal to 0 setup. That is the primary condition. If you have S equal to 0, nothing will come in EPR. Here you can go for NMR, but that won't provide you any information related to EPR. So it has to be S equal to not equal to 0. Okay. Now, how to get EPR active compound starting from a closed cell situation? Now, as far as the radical is concerned, so that is rather simple to understand. For example, if you go for homolytic cleavage over here, then you will be getting radical, right? So this RR bond cleavage would gives you R radical and R dot radical. If RR, then you cannot distinguish. Eh? If R and R prime, then you can get the two different radicals over here. So here, the radicals recombination, if it takes place, you will be getting a bond. And if it breaks, through the homolytic fission fashion, then you will be getting radical. On the other hand, in a metal complex system, you can get it through oxidation or through reduction. You may have a compound, say if I consider iron 2,1 compound, octahedral, tetrahedral, whatever, octahedral you consider it, and if it is a low spin iron 2, that means it will be T2G6, all the 6 electrons would be paired into the T2G level. So it will be a closed cell situation. But if you oxidized it to iron 3, then it will be T2G5. Then you will have one unpaired electron. On the other hand, if you reduce it, then you will be getting iron 1. That is a D7 system. That means one unpaired electron would be in the EG level. So you will have eventually you can generate that unpaired spin containing molecule from a closed cell molecule via oxidation reduction for metal complexes, or for organic molecules you have to have the radical generation, and then you can do it. But the problem of the organic radicals, most of the organic radicals are very reactive and short-lived. Okay, and you will see those who are very much interested in organic chemistry, you will see that either you will have nucleophilic pathway or the radical pathway in the reactions, either catalytic or non-catalytic. Now, how to differentiate it? That whether it is passing through a radical pathway or a non-radical pathway. So EPR is one of, NMR cannot help you to understand that. So reaction mechanism, if you need to understand, and where Your intermediates are very short-lived. Okay, it cannot be trapped by any other technique other than your EPR technique, because you can do the same reaction within the EPR cavity. So the radical it generates, and even if it's generate and it's very short-lived, you can freeze it immediately, and you can record the spectrum at a very high scan rate over there, and you will get a lot of information, particularly whether the reaction is following the radical pathway or the non-radical pathway. On the other hand, metal here probably the cationic and anionic species, the radical species, radical means unpaired electron is located on the metal center, may not be as reactive as that thing. So one can trace it at low temperature with the proper experimental setup is necessary. Okay. Now, what information we could get out of EPR? Now, there are two ways to understand it. One, from the physics point of view. If you go from physics angle, then a lot of wave functions, etc., all sort of things you can get out of these experimental techniques. But as a chemist, we only try to understand that what is the electronic feature of that paramagnetic molecules. Now you could feel in the beginning, oh, it's so simple. There is one unpaired electron, there will be certain responses, one could feel it, and that's all. But the issues are not that simple. There are many contradicting complications and complicated issues are there. And that is how we need to understand how the electronic structural aspects would follow in a particular molecule. And moreover, very interestingly, that it's very difficult to derive a general feature over there. That means with one molecule, you have struggled a lot, you got the spectrum, you analyzed the spectrum, you did calculations, and so many things, whatever you prefer to do and whatever accessible to it, and you got certain parallel informations. Now you could feel, well, I got this feature, so now for my PhD or for my life, I will prepare 100 molecules, and this idea could be extended to the rest of the molecule. No, it is not so. That's the problem with the EPR. That means you cannot derive a general statement, moving from one molecule to another molecule. Every molecule behaves differently due to variety of factors. You will understand it later, and then you need to check it other way. Now, disadvantage, that is the advantage part I said from physics and from chemistry point of view, but it has serious limitations. The limitations are you have to have one unpaired electron, either half integer or integer. Here I have just written integer, but it could be integral value also. You have to have at least one unpaired electron, if not more, unlike NMR. And its resolution is not as good as NMR, but the other thing is that that NMR you can do it at room temperature, and mostly we do the NMR at room temperature, and we get very good NMR. Organic molecules, so fantastic NMR. Even for complex metal complexes, we can get fairly good NMR spectra at room temperature. But that indeed does not happen in case of EPR. You have to go to very low temperature, not only low temperature. In many occasions, even liquid nitrogen temperature, that is 77 K, which is not enough to get the reasonable to necessary resolution of the spectrum to understand it. You have to go down to the maximum possible low temperature, say 4K, by using liquid helium to get a fairly resolved spectrum. So all sort of issues are there. Those are considered to be the disadvantage as far as the EPR is concerned as compared to your NMR is concerned. Now, as I said, that for a molecule to be EPR active, you need to have at least 1 ampere electron, if not more. Now the nature, if you see our nature, there are certain paramagnetic molecules, not many, but there are certain paramagnetic molecules. I have just drawn two. These are our biologically relevant, very important molecule. Say molecular oxygen, and if you put the ampere total electrons 4 plus 4 in the simple MO diagram, there are two possibilities that these two electrons could be paired up in the antibonding orbitals, and then you will be getting singlet oxygen. And but under normal circumstances, we don't get the singlet oxygen, we get the triplet oxygen, because singlet pairing of these two unpaired electrons in the antibonding orbital requires is an energetically aphel process. So that's not the normal circumstances. So it's a triplet molecule. Okay, and its EPS spectrum would be completely different than the EPS spectrum what you could expect out of the NO. Now you know that oxygen is so necessary for our survival. On the other hand, NO gas, NO, you know, we did not understand NO since long, though NO was discovered long back, and people did not understand what is NO. They're around 60s, 1960s I'm talking about. Around 60s, that means 80 years back, first time it was considered to be one of the suspect molecules. Suspect in the sense, the electronic structures of NO was not known. Only that time it used to consider as a poisonous gas, colorless poisonous gas. And it's true. If you inhale NO, we cannot sustain, we'll be dying. Okay. But remember that NO is such an important biological molecule in a ppm level. If you have more amount, then it will cause harm to you, to death even. But if you take, in biology generates NO through a lot of metabolic processes, and that NO actually helps us to breathe. Breathe in the sense our blood pressure, everything is controlled by NO, and also all the neurosignaling processes which are being guided through the NO. It's such an important molecule. Without NO in our system, we cannot sustain through our biological processes. But this NO is having 1 unpaired electron. You see the 3 plus 4, 7. So naturally 1 unpaired electron, and it is there, and that's why it's a radical. Now remember that NO is a very unique radical. It's a neutral radical, where it does not require to inject 1 electron, as I said in the previous slide, or to pull out 1 electron to make it a radical. It's a natural radical. So it is not plus cationic, it is neither cationic nor anionic. So it is one of the radical molecules which is neutral in nature. Okay, very interesting molecule. So this could be studied by EPR. This could be studied by EPR. And as such, from the, NO or oxygen, EPR is not very interesting. But if it interacts with the metal, then it becomes extremely complicated and interesting. We will talk about it in due course. Okay. Now you see that one reaction scheme I have shown over here from the simple organic point of view. Those who understand or who likes organic chemistry too much, for them is nothing. But from EPR point of view, there are a lot of points over here. Let us discuss this issue. You start with this particular molecule, very well-known molecule, readily available commercially, and it's called 3,6-diamino 1,4-dihydroxy 3,6-diamino 1,4-dihydroxy benzene. Now you add little bit base, say NET3 or sodium hydroxide, then 4 H plus would be liberated, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it will look like this. It's a highly, electronically rich molecule, because you could see there are 4 anion is there. Okay, and it's not very stable molecule. And then what will happen if you allow this molecule to lose its electrons in a successive fashion? It does not happen always. It loses the 4 electrons immediately to reach to a stable form. But we can examine these molecules from the broader perspective of EPR spectroscopy, that if we allow this, if we record the electrochemistry of this molecule, which I'm not going to talk about over here, but we can do the electrochemistry of this molecule, and then we will see it undergoes successive oxidations and reduction. In this case, it is oxidation processes. Okay, and if you start from here, that will be the reduction processes. Okay, and you could see the plus sign here, and you could see the minus sign over here. That means this side is the oxidation, that side is the reduction. It's a reversible process. So it's a very challenging molecule. Now, the first electron, if you oxidize this, it could leave from oxygen and from nitrogen, or from nitrogen, because both are electronically rich center, but it would certainly leave from nitrogen instead of oxygen, because it is nitrogen is more basic. So you will have a nitrogen radical over here, right? And then if you allow the one more electron to leave, that means one more oxidation, you will be getting one diradical. Both are on the nitrogen side, and then it will have its resonating form. Okay, and if you look at the resonating form, it's electronically just rebalancing over here, and there is no unpaired spin over here, so it passes through the one radical. Without EPR, you cannot write down the way it has been written over here. That is the strength of the EPR technique. And remember, though it is a strength, but it requires a lot of expertise and challenges to trap this intermediate radical, which is very reactive and immediately gets converted to this position. So you have to have a technique, and that technique, you have to have a technique, and by which you can trap the radical quickly and record it at a very low temperature, say 4K temperature. Similarly, if we allow the third electron to move on, naturally this nitrogen cannot be reduced fast, oxidized. So one of the oxygen would be oxidized, and then the fourth electron, that means total 4 electron transfer, you will have the 2 radicals over here, and then it can give you the resonating structure like this, but it's a biradical. So what are you getting? You are getting one nitrogen radical over here, you are getting one oxygen based radical over here, and here you are getting one diradical species. This is stable diradical. Okay, and interestingly, you will see later on when we will talk about it, the EPR profile of this radical, which is essentially localized on the nitrogen center, and the EPR profile of this intermediate, that means after third electron oxidation, where the radical is localized on the oxygen center, the EPR profile would be completely different between these two. So you can diagonalize very, very easily if you can record their EPR in a very professional fashion, and you can tell, yes, this corresponds to this nitrogen one, and this corresponds to this oxygen one. And moreover, once you record the EPR of this one, that feature would be absolutely different compared to the other two. So you can essentially diagonalize, you can essentially recognize that which EPR corresponds to what. Okay, first of all, you have to understand that theoretically what kind of EPR you should expect out of these 3 paramagnetic molecules, and then you see that what kind of spectrum you are actually getting out of the instrument, and you will be seeing all are absolutely it is matching so nicely. So that is the